What up, Wizards? It's Dev, Mtg, a legend in my own mind. And today we're going to do what is almost always my favorite video of every preview season, but especially a preview season like this one, because look, we're going back to Dominaria, baby, and there's really not a whole lot of hype that could surpass this level of hype at this point. I mean, content creators are still busy freaking out about the best cards in this set to this very moment, but around here we like to go deep. Just ask your dad. We like to go super deep around here. So today we're going to blow past all those cards everyone's talking about. Try to talk about some cards no one's talking about. Here are the top 10 sleepers in Dominaria United.
And I'm your favorite Magic Channel's favorite Magic Channel. Best believe that the professor go bananas for my deck techs. I come correct like a porn star, slicing up all these other suckers with my sword mark.
We back. Remember to like and subscribe for more stuff, but that's enough attention for me. Let's talk about some cards that aren't getting anywhere near enough attention. And that was honestly kind of hard to do this time around. Like I said, it's Dominaria. I mean, we're talking about pretty much every card in this set. But even with that being the case, I was pretty easily able to find 10 plus, it's an SP Mtg list, 10 plus cards that I wanted to talk about today. Like for instance, our honorable mention, that's right, I'm going to go ahead and get into the list. When did I learn to be expeditious about things? I'm kind of screwing it up right now, but let's go. Honorable mention, Rona Sheoldred's Faithful. I know a lot of you are not super interested in playing this card, but I actually think it's got some things going for it. You know, I really like this passive ability. We've seen it on a few cards lately in the last couple of years. We've had some fun with it, and I think it'll be fun here, especially in a color combination that should do this pretty easily. It casts spells fairly easily in that color combination, but I think it might actually have a chance in Leer decks, or at least I want to try it in those decks. You know, the Leer decks lose kind of some important win conditions. You know, they lose creature lands, which were kind of one of the biggest win conditions they had. So they can't just kind of coast off of Leer and like one copy of Hullbreaker Horror all the time. So I wouldn't be surprised to see like a copy or two of this card show up, and then suddenly you can discard cards to it to get it out of your graveyard, and that's kind of fine because you can just recast the stuff you discard with Leer a little later on, and that's kind of okay. And then once you have your Leer down, you can cast things out of your yard and drain your opponent with Rona. So I think they're kind of a little dream team that might be win more, but especially since they're losing some win conditions, the Dimir deck might need to win a little bit more. And by the way, speaking of the creature lands, like pretty much every deck in Standard is losing like a hard to kill sort of sweeper proof threat, and Rona could fill that void. Again, the Dimir deck really needs to replace those creature lands, and this doesn't completely do it, but it goes a little bit of the way to give them a recursive threat they didn't really have access to before. So again, I like this more than I should. Maybe it shouldn't have been the honorable mention, especially when you see my number 10, which is Inscribed Tablet. For some, this probably should have been the honorable mention. I think I've talked myself into Rona too much, but I could see getting into this thing just a little bit. I think it might have some relevance in formats other than Standard, like for instance Commander and those like 99 land Commander decks. This is effectively just get whatever you want off the top of your library, and that's nice. I mean, the card does say land. You just get any land, doesn't matter. So this can put like a channel land into your hand, and that's basically like getting a spell, like drawing a card kind of. So that's kind of sweet. You know, it can put triomes into your hand and other important things. And if you do have like a deck in Standard that's so focused on land that you're playing like the 35 land deck, these have existed before and they can exist again. Then a card like this could be really good again because like it just basically says get the best card from the top 5. And hey, if you don't hit a land off the top, you do get to draw a card, and that's fine. I mean, there might be some intersection somewhere of a deck that cares not just about lands, but also about playing cheap artifacts. And if that ever happens, that'll be the day for this guy right here, finally. I'm not sure it's going to happen anytime soon, but it's at least a card I'm keeping my eye on. I should have said I'm keeping tabs on it. That would have been not funny, but it would have been better. Let's move on, anyway, to number 9, which is Vaishino Branchwright. Not a branch walker. Not a branch. He goes so much harder than that. This is a branch rider. Kind of like that. Does anybody else have the promo for Tarzan, the Disney Tarzan, like ingrained into their head for no reason? There's like a whole 20-minute thing where they talk about how like, oh, we looked at professional inline skaters and rollerbladers to make this part where he's like surfing on the branches. Does anybody else have this just like pounded into their head and it sits in a corner of your brain waiting to be accessed at all times? I don't know. I'm a millennial. But anyway, let's go. Let's talk about what the card does. Sometimes I get around to doing that. This is just a single one, well, just a red mana. That's all. 1/1 haste. Raging Goblin, but like it's got some of the best upside for a Raging Goblin I've ever seen. I mean, it just does a bunch of stuff, you know. You can kick it, make it a little bit bigger. That's cool. It's got haste. You know, 3/3 haste isn't the worst thing in the world on some board states and some game situations. And then you can even pump it. I mean, that's fine. You know, there's going to be some times against like Control where you get wrathed. You know, you just get hit by the dreaded sweeper. And then you draw this with like 7 mana up and you're like, well, I might as well swing for 5, you know. This turn, swing in haste, kill your planeswalker, whatever's clever. You know, I could see this actually being a decent little like early game play to get in a few damage, like a bolts or shocks worth of damage, right? And then it actually has like a threat of activation later in the game when you got nothing else to do with your mana. And then if you rip it off the top of your library, like it's kind of serviceable then too. So there's just like not a bad spot for this dude in most games. And I actually think a Gruul aggro deck is shaping up. Gruul's like the only aggro deck at all in the format that got like a Karplusan Forest, right? It got a Pain Land. You know, Boros didn't get one unless you want to count the gate that everyone got. And I think you do want to count that thing, but at the same time, Karplusan Forest, you know, the green-red Pain Land, is like one of the only aggro-centric Pain Lands that we got. And with cards like this and some other cards in the set, I think Gruul is actually setting up to be like a pretty good deck. And I think this could be a part of it. This is a serious card, guys. It's just easy to think this guy is not great or just kind of like, oh, you know, 1 mana, 1/1 haste, and does a couple things. That's a lot of mana for stuff. And it's still probably okay in some situations. So I think this card will be better than we think it is. But it's kind of the whole point of this list. So let's move on to another card that fits that criteria. What is number 8? Oh, this is a good one. This is one that I actually considered putting like all the way up in the top 3. But I have a lot of faith in the Weather Seed Treaty. And yes, despite the fact that if you freeze frame at the very end of that bit there, you might see a pained look on my face, like, a treaty. I still think this is actually a decent card, you know. Like I've said before, these 3 mana go get a thing, a land, and put it into play tapped. As long as these have adequate upside, they're actually pretty playable, and I think this does, you know. No matter what you do, if you just get all 3 chapters, or if you read ahead, there's like actual relevance to this card in like multiple game states that are super likely to happen. You know, just you play it on turn 3 and it's your ramp, but on the next turn it provides a blocker. That's really important for your ramp deck. And then on the next turn, it might give a big old boosty to some guy. You know, it might just make the 1/1 like a 4/4 if you have a single Tri-Elm in play and like no other basic land types. But if you do have all 5 in play, it makes that 1/1 like a 6/6 trample. I actually think that one of the key words on this card is trample. On that last ability, I think it'd be pretty easy to see the last chapter is kind of meh, not that important. It's not going to do much for you. But I think the fact that it gives a plus bonus and tramps is actually kind of sick in a lot of situations. You know, in terms of what ramps one single land for 3 mana in this format, I think I kind of like this on par or even more in some cases than a card like Topiary Stomper. You know, it's easier to cast, and that's important in decks that play like all 5 colors like you want to here. So, I don't know. I think this card has like a real chance, and I see like literally 0 people talking about it. There were a few sagas that I considered for the list, but by the end of the day, I was like, I just want to do 1 saga, and that's it. So there were a few on here, right? Like the blue 2-mana saga that's on screen right now. I think that thing is getting a little bit too much talk to be in a sleepers list. And then what is it? Yosha Declares War? No one's talking about that card, and I think it might be okay. But I also think it might not be very good at all. This card, though, I think is actually pretty obviously playable while still meeting the criteria that like literally no one's talking about it. And I don't get why. Card looks good. So don't trick yourself into thinking treaty is bad. Halloween, is it too early? Halloween joke? Anyway, number 7 as I look at my phone. So professional at what I do. Number 7 has switched around a lot. At first, number 7 was Tolarian Terror. And the more I look at Tolarian Terror, the more I'm like, you're not actually very good, are you? I want you to be good so bad. Please be good, but you're probably not. So let's look at Raph. Weatherlight Stalwart, which I also have my doubts about, but I think he's actually a pretty good looking card. You know, he can tap himself to use his own abilities. So you really only have to have like 1 other creature out. It's kind of okay. You know, he's also got this ridiculously expensive Anthem effect on him, but in the decks he wants to be in, these like blue-white tempo decks that have like Illuminator Virtuoso and stuff, there's a couple of issues. There's a couple of good things too, right? I don't know. It's not the worst thing in the world, the activated ability, but I admit that it is expensive. You mostly are going to use this if the game goes too long for your comfort in those blue-white tempo decks. And that's where the activated ability is actually going to be, again, probably better than you think. Because like those blue-white tempo decks get to turn 5 or 6 way more than I think blue-white tempo players would care to admit. And at that point, ability like this, when you draw land for the turn, might be okay. Might be, but what I'm more interested in, especially again if you don't draw very well for the turn, is like EOT or more likely on blocks when your opponent attacks in. You know, block with a thing, you're going to lose it anyway. I might as well tap down Raph and it to draw a card, you know. Card draw is so important in those decks, and even though cards like, you know, Storm Chaser Drake help them draw more cards, they really don't have quite enough card draw at this point. So I could see a 1 or 2 of Raph to round things out. And even though I'm a little doubtful that ends up happening, I don't know if the card's aggressive enough. I think there might be better 2-drops that fit into those slots. I still again think that a 1 or 2 of Raph is not completely out of the question. Oh, by the way, just like one more quick thing, kind of neat how well he works with Vigilance. And he also makes your creatures vigilant. Now, you might not have a whole lot of mana to spend on spells after you do that ability, but still, if you do have some vigilant dudes around, it's cool that they can like attack in and then also draw cards. I just want to point that out. But anyway, let's move on to the card that I'm always going to forget the name of this card, even though I'm excited about it. I think it's Nessoba Brawler. Did I get it? Yeah, wow, I nailed it. Okay. So Nessoba Brawler, I forgot what number we're on, is number 6. Why do you watch me? Number 6 is Nessoba Brawler. You put that together by now. I think that this card is surprisingly quiet. I haven't heard like a lot of the content creators that I visit for spoiler content. Yes, I do that. There's like 4 people I go to for spoiler content, mostly when I'm done with my spoiler content. I just want to see what their takes are, but I just haven't really seen a whole lot of people pointing out, you know, this card whatsoever, or when people do have to talk about it, they don't really talk about it for long, and I don't get that. It's just, you put a Triome down on turn 1, play this on turn 2, and then it's not actually that small. Like immediately, it's a 2-mana 3/3, and that's like pretty good. But if you play a second, you know, really a 4th land type on turn 2, then it's a 2-mana 4/3, and then you can swing for 5 on turn 3 with it, and that's like pretty easily, honestly, fairly easily you can do that. And it has trample. By the way, I just want to throw this out here. This plays kind of well with Weatherseed Treaty. We've got, I think, enough 5-color support, especially again when the rest of the Pain lands come out. I think a 5-color aggro deck is kind of possible, and this is the 2-drop you want. But we're halfway down the list, and I got kind of a weird one for you. I brought this one up on stream the other night, and there were people like, I did not know this card existed. So let's look at Shadow Prophecy here. This reminds me a bit of Grizzly Salvage. You know, you gotta really cock your head at it. And the best decks that play it are going to be the ones that are all 5 colors. But, you know, even if you're only playing 3 colors, I kind of feel like this card is a little bit fine. You know, look at the top 3 cards of your library in this case. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, you get the best 2, put the other one in your graveyard. It's kind of sick, you know, the fact that you put the other ones in your graveyard, a little bit phenomenal, really, because you can just reanimate those, flash them back, whatever you want to do. They count towards, you know, certain stuff. Hey, Tolarian Terror. Just put a bunch of instants and sorceries in your yard with this. It is an instant, so it counts towards terror. Also, it's an instant. I just said that, but I just want to hammer it home. This could have been a sorcery, and it just would have been like a ho-hum, you know. Oh, I expected the card to be that, but no, it's instant speed. And a potential instant speed, look at the top 5, get the best 2, and put the others in your yard. That's actually kind of a ridiculous Magic card that I think you really need to know exists. I mean, it might be a little bit hard to enable. It might, but I actually think this card is powerful enough to see some real play, especially if 5-color decks are a thing. You know, if they're mid-range or control-oriented in any way, which I think they very well likely will be. Cannot English, can I? But either way, I think we'll probably see a deck like that. And in those decks, this card is extremely powerful. I mean, just imagine your opponent resolving this at the end of your turn. And then they get to untap with the best 2 from their top of their library. I mean, you already know how good like Memory Deluge is, right? Right? Only Memory Deluge doesn't also give them a bunch of cards in their yard they can use too. So I just think this card is really, really good. And in some ways, I'm going to go ahead and say this. I feel weird saying it. One of the stronger cards in the set, and just nobody knows it yet. The next is my girl, Dani. Number 4, Benalia's Hope. Now, I had hoped that Danitha would be a better card than this, but the more I think about it, the more I kind of like this. I really actually do. 5 mana seems like a lot, but she's easy to cast. There's no like double white pip or anything like that. She is easy to cast. And 4/4 Vigilance Lifelink, like that's kind of good enough right there, but you add the first strike to it, and it's like, well, this can take down an awful lot of 4 toughness dudes, and there are going to be a lot of 4 toughness dudes. We're in a lightning strike format. A lot of people are going to be playing 4 toughness creatures, which Danitha then just first strikes into and kills. So that's pretty good. And first strike and lifelink on the same thing are good. You don't have to tap this to swing in with it, which is, again, better than you think it is, because it's really difficult to block. If they do block it, you're going to gain the life one way or the other. You have a chance of gaining life on your attack step, and when you block with this, I could see this just brickwalling the game in the same way that like Lyra Dawnbringer does. Just this like fat lifelink thing your opponent can't attack into. And I think Danitha's really good at that, and I haven't even talked about the actual ability on Danitha. Just like the rate for the keyword abilities and stuff. I think it's kind of okay, sort of, if you turn your head at it long enough. It's kind of all right, I think that this is a pretty good mix of keywords. It's difficult to get over, but, the moment you can get extra value off of it and just put, like, I don't even care if it's like a 2 or 3 mana, like aura or equipment onto it from your yard or something, or your hand, that's still extra value. So at that point, if a 5 mana 4/4 first strike vigilance lifelink, like, was already almost on curve for standard, then like whatever mana value you're adding to it at that point makes it incredible. So I don't know, especially if we get some like really desirable, like a nice juicy like 7 mana aura we can dump into our yard really easily, throw Danitha down, and boom, it's like a reanimator aura deck of some kind. Maybe, but right now, I'm not sure that I see the card, but this is one that, again, I want you to remember exists, because once it's on the battlefield, it's kind of hard to combat around. So there's that. But again, depending on what we're introduced to, we're in the smallest standard possible. Depending on what we're introduced to moving forward, this card could get righteous quick. Now, we're almost in the top 3, but let's take a little coffee break here, because I've got a few cards I want to talk about that didn't quite make the list for one reason or another. But I'm not going to spend too long on these. I'm just going to kind of try to run through these as fast as I can. I've got 1 common, 1 uncommon, 1 rare, and 1 mythic that I want to bring up here. Now, the common is... What is the common, Dev? It's Yavimaya Steel Crusher. Again, I just haven't heard too many people talk about this, and it's just solid. 2 mana 2/2, the enlist is gravy, but the real good thing about this is just pay a mana sack it, get rid of that artifact forever. Creatures like this tend to be playable, and I am the only person that I've heard bring up the card. So remember, it exists. I also like Sprouting Goblin. Now, this slot was almost Runic Shot, but I think that just slightly too many people have talked about Runic Shot at this point, whether they said the card was ultimately good or bad. I think that Runic Shot has seen a little too much discussion, whereas this Sprouting Goblin, whatever it is, I don't even remember the name of it. That's how forgotten the card is. I think that this card is one that we should be discussing a little bit more. I mean, on the one hand, sack a land, draw a card is not good, but in the late game, just 1 mana to effectively draw a card. You just sack, it's tap a red source and then sack that red source. Draw a card could really help you get through your deck actually pretty quickly, and then the ability to go get land is really sweet too. I like all the utility on this thing. But the rare I want to talk about is Voldalian Mindshaper. Look, I may have been a little bit too tough on this during spoiler season. I mean, if you kick it once, I believe that it's out of lightning strike range was a big deal. I guess that Mind Flayer burned me. Mind Flayer is like one of my favorite things in D&D, just one of my favorite beings in D&D, and I really like control magic effects, like thief effects and stuff like that in standard. And I really wanted Mind Flayer to be good, but it just never was. They always kill your Mind Flayer. And I think the same thing's probably going to happen with this, but it's not quite as susceptible to damage-based removal or the Meat Hook Massacre, which is a big one too. So I think that it might have a little bit more of a shot this time around, especially considering this is a lot more versatile of a card than Mind Flayer ever was. So I do like this, and I'm not sure a whole lot of people do. And see, I'm objective. I am capable of changing my mind. But to pick a mythic for this category, I'm just going to go with Sarah Paragon. Look, I've seen a couple of people talk about this card, but I still don't know that as a whole, as a community, we're really taking this card seriously enough. I think Paragon might actually be, again, I'll say this, one of the stronger cards in the set, and not enough people see that. If it spends even a turn on the battlefield, you're going to untap and do something wild with it, but you don't even have to untap with it on the battlefield, depending on how much mana you have. I mean, how many times have you dry cast a mascot exhibition or a titan of industry in this environment these last couple of months, right? I mean, 7 mana is not like the hardest thing in the world to get to. So if you play Paragon and still have the mana left to do something else besides just play a land, you're getting too much value a lot of the time. And if that thing ever dies, you get 2 life. And even if all you get is a land, it's still like mono white ramp. That's kind of sexy. So like, I like so much about this card. Why aren't we talking about it? I mean, this card has just been gone from all discussion this spoiler season, except for, again, a couple of people. I mean, it's not just gone. It's gone enough for 2 cards. It's Paragon. But anyway, that was the coffee break right there. Let's move on to the top 3. Some real good cards that I just don't think we're talking about at all. And why not? Number 3 is Etherchandler. Look, this card really illustrates to me how much Magic players want. I talked about this a little bit in the spoiler video, but among the things I saw people say about this card is that, like, it should have cost a mana less. It should have flash. You should be able to choose 2 of these options instead of just the 1. This should have better creature types. And, like, it got all the way down to where professors responding to me on Twitter saying, like, this card should have been white. It should have been a Homerid. Like, you know, that's Magic players for you. I think at 3 mana, this card is more than fine. It works pretty well with the Golden Argosy. If you want an idea, probably a bad one, but an idea. It works well in like other formats with Teleportation Circle and Yorion, obviously. This looks like a ridiculous card in Yorion and Historic. So again, free idea. It's all yours. And just know that this is many times better than Callous Blood Mage. And I find that obvious. But apparently not everybody does. I'm not sure this is destined to see all the standard play in the world. I'll go ahead and say that right now. I'll hedge my bets a bit, but still. This card just has so much value stacked onto it. It really wouldn't surprise me if it saw some play at some point. But apparently everyone thinks it's bad. It's not that no one's talking about this card. It's that we've noticed and discussed it at length and people have moved on from it. It's not good. And it's just... Etherchandler's back here like, what do you want from me? The same thing is true, I think, of number 2, actually. I think it fits that bill pretty well. Of a card that we've talked about, we read it, and we're like, and then we just think about it for 2 seconds, and we're like, no, you're not good. I know you're not good, but I actually think Astor, probably okay, you know? I just haven't seen too many people talk about this card past dismissing it this season, and I think it's pretty dang good, dang it. First of all, this immediately lets your Weatherlight be able to be crewed on turn 4 when you play it, regardless of whether or not you have 4 counters on it. Normally you have to have like 4 dudes die, you put counters on Phyrexia or the Weatherlight completed, and then you can swing with it. But with this, it just has crew 1. It finally has a crew cost. That in and of itself is good, but there's already a Mardu Vehicles deck with Greasefang, Parhelion 2, and all that stuff just tearing up some or multiple older formats at this point. And I think that this slots right in, right? And like, if you do happen to also be running equipments, that's fine. You know, it's going to get the best vehicle off the top 7. So like Naya and Historic right now gets this dude that can just find the Rasika's Chariot for them when it comes into place. That's cool. But still, you know, this finds whatever vehicle you're looking for. Everything from, you know, Mysterious Limousine on into, you know, again, Golden Argosy, if that's what you're looking to do in Standard. So I think that this is actually really sweet. I mean, it's card advantage. It replaces itself the moment it comes into play. 9 times out of 10, 7 cards is this huge dig. So it should fairly easily replace itself. It works with so many different cards in both Standard, you know, Historic, Explorer, whatever. It works with Colossus Hammer really well for what that's worth. Might not be worth much, but it works. And if I ever don't have enough butt, I will head on down to the Astor and buy some... Anyway, number 1. We've made it all the way to number 1. Ziggy's at the door. Well, Ziggy came in, but Chicken's the one that jumped up here, so you get a pretty cat for number 1. Number 1, oh, bye. Number 1 is Herd Migration. This is another one that I've seen discussed, but just kind of gets dismissed pretty much every time it is discussed. And I've even seen people say that Floriferous Vine Wall is probably better than this card. I'm not too sure about that. I do, for the record, I do like Vine Wall, and it almost made this list. But I think Migration is just a little bit better for the most part. Here's Ziggy. Now, first of all, I've said this before, but again, I said it this video. Imagine how many times, just think back to how many times you cast a Mascots Exhibition in the last really like year and a half. It's kind of a lot, depending on what kind of player you are. But I guess if you've never played it, think of how many times it's been cast against you. It's a lot, right? So 7 mana really isn't too much to ask for 15 power and toughness. It's a win condition that also helps you assemble your domain Tron, and that's really important. It also helps you stay in the game while you're just getting your face caved in by Boris or whatever's happening on the other side of the table. Your Gruul opponent's on the play and they played 3 haste guys in the early game. This will help negate some of that damage, which I think it's actually going to be really important. And don't forget, by the way, that in the 5-color Legends Joda deck that cares about domain and all that stuff, this is actually pretty good with Shigeki. Shigeki is a legend. You want to play it in the Joda deck anyway. You want to play 2-drop legends. Shigeki's really good at that. And Shigeki can also get this back from your graveyard after you channel it, put it in your hand, and then suddenly you'll probably, at that point in the game, if you're channeling with Shigeki, you'll probably have 7 mana just to cast this. So I really like this. I think it works in multiple spots in Standard, and I think it's going to be an important card. I got a good feeling about this one, and I really, really like this card one way or the other. It's not your Gratian, it's my Gratian, and I'm going to try to make it work. You heard last cringy joke about that card, but we are donezo for this onezo, everybody. There were a lot more cards I could have mentioned on this list, even though I somehow squeezed in 15. Very sneaky of me, but if you're still here after all of that, thanks. It's crazy. You watch an entire YouTube video to the very end. That's amazing. I really appreciate that. Helps with my watch time. You can do the liking and the subscribing. You can check out Patreon. It's only $1 a month, linked in the description. And if you throw me that buck a month, you get to vote on what content we do this season, what top 10 lists, what essays, what decks, all that stuff. You'll be invited to vote for just $1 a month. Really helps out the channel. Aside from that, you can check out the Twitch streams. I will be participating in early access this season. Holy crap, we made it. Squad up, we did it. But yeah, that's going to be Tuesday, which is probably the same day you're watching this video. But later on in the afternoon, probably starting 5, 6, something like that. I can't put a concrete time on it. But a little bit later on in the afternoon, I'm going to be playing some Dominaria United cards. A day or 2 before they release. I'm really excited about that. So come join us on twitch.tv/sbmtgdev, or again, link in the description, late in the afternoon on Tuesday. We're going to be playing with some of these cards. I cannot wait to play Elasil Core. Guarantee we'll try that card out. But anyway, that's all I've got for this one. Come join me on the Twitch streams, check out the Patreon, and do all the YouTube stuff. And of course, most importantly, let me know how you felt about the list and any cards that you'd put on it. Let me know what cards you're looking at pretty hard that you don't think anybody else is looking at. But after you're done with that, I guess just cut the lights on your way out. And I'll catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Blaze. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.